Hello, my name is Dylan Bush. Today I'm here with IBIS Academy, and I am going to be walking you through the Lewis and Clark lesson plan that has been posted to our website. Um, the project will be posted with all the components, including the lesson plan, the assignment, the roll cards, the slideshow, as well as links to the YouTube channel with the teacher's guide, which is this video, as well as the information about the content about Lewis and Clark, which can be given to the students. Let us get started off with the lesson plan. When you open it up, you'll see that there's the compelling question on the left here. On the right, it takes about 45, 55 minutes, depending on the class size, depending on what students you have. The learning targets and the question of the day are presented below. The required materials and the differentiated instructional strategies are also presented here on the first page. If you make your way down to the second page, this is where you see the procedures of the lessons, which it's broken up into 4 different segments: the hook, development, body, and conclusion. Starting off with the hook here, the first thing students will be doing with this Lewis and Clark lesson plan is a think, pair, share lesson activity where they will be using the slideshow, which all the teachers that are looking at this lesson have access to. They will be using the slideshow to perform this think, pair, share. They're going to be tasked with thinking about what's out in the world, out in the universe, kind of get their minds thinking about what exists out there beyond our universe, getting that explorational mindset. This is to make the connection with Lewis and Clark and their explorational thoughts as well. As we learn further in the slideshow, we'll find out that Americans didn't always have the greatest idea of what existed out west before we have all of our technology today that tells us what does. So that idea of what exists outside the universe can be paralleled with what exists out west. Okay, so we go back to the lesson plan. The think, pair, share model works like this. For 1 minute, students are going to think to themselves. They're not going to be talking. It'll be silent. They'll record their answers on a piece of paper. If you have whiteboards and whiteboard markers, you can do that. If you want to, you can create a Google form and have them record it for some formative assessment, but you don't have to. Then for a minute, they will be paired up with someone sitting next to them. The teacher can make those pairs, or you can allow them to choose for themselves. They will share for 1 minute, and again, there's a timer included in the slideshow about what they experienced and what their thoughts were. And then finally, for about 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how long you want to spend on it, you can share as a class. Have the teacher call on students to share their answers. You can call on students who are usually shyer to make sure that their voices are being heard, or if you would prefer to just use the volunteer system, by all means go with that. But the goal with this think, pair, share is to get their minds going, thinking about exploration, while also encouraging them to know about the unknown and make that connection to Lewis and Clark. As we go down here, we're looking at the Lewis and Clark lecture. Depending on your lecturing style, depending on your preferences, depending on your kids, you can spend some time on this and try to breeze through it to just introduce it very briefly. Or if you really want to get into it, you can spend maybe closer to 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes talking about what's going on. If you've been building up to Lewis and Clark with Jefferson's presidency, you can make some of those connections as well, which is the 5th slide in this, and it talks about Thomas Jefferson buying Louisiana. Slide 6 also does a little bit of preview before we get into the lesson too deep, talking about Napoleon and the French selling Louisiana to the United States. Jefferson, did he overstep his authority as president of the United States? Because nothing in the Constitution says a president can buy land from a foreign country. So all of those things are being talked about. I've also included some pictures from my trip to the Fort Clatsop Museum in West, I think Oregon or Washington. I can't remember what side of the border it's on, but that's another thing that students can also find interesting. Moving on, we will get into, after you talk about all the lectures of Lewis and Clark, we'll move on to the main assignment, which is the mixer activity. Now, this mixer activity is not something that I created. I created the cards, I created the questions, but this idea of the mixer activity, the first time I have seen it was with the Zinn Education Project of Howard Zinn, A People's History of the United States. Great website, great resource. You can use that. That's for the first time I've seen this mixer assignment before, but I have adapted it to the content of Lewis and Clark. So it gives you a little bit of a description right there. And essentially, what students are going to be doing is they are going to be pretending they are historical figures in a socialized setting. And this setting is the Lewis and Clark expedition era, early 1800s. Students will be receiving a card that talks about a historical figure. It could be one of the various Indian chiefs on the plains. It can be Lewis and Clark. It can be any of the crew members. It can be Sacagawea. There are so many options in this, and all of them have unique cards and information. A lot of them have ties with other people, whether they're relatives, whether they were serving in the army together, or they're from a similar country. Whatever the case may be, students are going to learn about their card. They're going to read through their description 4 or 5 times. After they've done that, then they will begin the next part of the mixer, which is to actually interact with other people. During this segment, the body part, which lasts usually 25 to 30 minutes, again, depending on class size, depending on the level of students, students should only be working on the front side. Here's what the assignment looks like. There's the front side right there. And then if you scroll down, this is the back side. Students should not be focusing on the back side. They should only be focusing on the front side. They're going to go around, though, and find people that meet these questions. So as they're interacting and introducing themselves as those people, again, you wouldn't introduce yourself as your students' names. You'd be introducing themselves as, hi, I am Lewis, or I am Clark, or I am Reuben Field. He's another one of the people on the journey. You're going to try to find people that meet these categories and then explain the second part of all of these, which is how did they get involved, or why were they excited about the trip, or why was this a bad thing? Some of the questions near the bottom focus on some of the negative interactions Lewis and Clark had with those who lived out west. As this is going on, beforehand, teachers, it's a good idea to scaffold appropriate behavior. It's a good idea to take a student, bring them up front in class, and really talk about the appropriate behaviors when interacting with one another. This might be more of an issue depending on the grade level, but you should be focusing on staying in character. The students should not say their real names. They should act like they are those people, and therefore they should keep that persona up as the activity goes on. As this goes around for teachers, it's a good idea to kind of move around the room, not following any one student, but just making sure there aren't giant blobs of students, that there should be more spread out, that they should be having genuine conversations to learn about each other's characters. After this is done, about 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, then have students return back to their seat. This gets us into our final segment of the lesson, which is the conclusion. Students will be returning to their seats, like I'd mentioned. Then the teacher is going to lead a class discussion, and I leave it pretty open-ended, but I like to usually ask students what they thought, how they interacted with people, interesting stories they had heard or learned, and maybe if there was an impact that a certain person or group of people had on Lewis and Clark, or vice versa, as that's kind of the main idea with this lesson. As you have that interaction and the class discussion, you wrap up with the back side of the assignment. So this is the front side, questions 1 through 9. You flip over to the back, and it focuses on, well, who's the person on your card? What positive and negative experiences did you notice from the trip? And then finally, this is the wrap it up question, as I kind of like to call it, which is explaining the impact of Lewis and Clark's expedition. And I want students to think about, well, how does it impact Americans, Indians, slaves, and Europeans, as they are all fighting for control of the North American continent. A lot of interesting interactions happen, and that's one area that I really want students to focus on. Once they're finished, they can turn it into you. One thing that has arisen in the classes that I have run this with is occasionally students will not be able to answer all 9 questions given the time constraints, depending on how long your classes are. If that's the case, what I recommend doing is posting all of these roll cards on a Google Classroom, or printing packets off and letting students borrow them so they can go through and read them on their own time if they were not able to interact with students during the actual activity itself. I've also included links to all of the sources for where I got the information from for all of these people. All of these people are real individuals. They are historically based. The only one that is not is number 15. the Indian from the Blackfeet tribe. I gave that person a fake name because in all the sources I could not find a name for this person. They were unfortunately killed by Lewis and Clark's expedition during a incident that turned sour quite quickly. So I created a name so that students that got that card would be able to have a name of some sorts. But this lesson is really targeted for students who, as you can see kind of up here in the differentiated instruction strategies, that are intrapersonal and interpersonal, because there's many times when students are reading, they're learning on their own, but also they are able to interact with one another, especially at younger grade levels where students like to move around a little bit more. The kinesthetic learners are going to have a great time because they get to move around the classroom and interact verbally. They get to say what they want. So yes, thank you for checking out this lesson and supporting IBIS Academy. Please tune into our website and our YouTube channel to keep up with more lessons and more activities and articles and videos that will be posted. And thank you for your support. We really appreciate it.